The soldiers at Forward Operating Base Thunderbolt had witnessed every type of warrior imaginable during their 8-month deployment in the unforgiving mountains of eastern Afghanistan, but none of them were prepared for the sight of Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stepping off the dusty Chinook helicopter on that blazing Thursday afternoon in July, at barely 5'2" and weighing no more than 115 pounds soaking wet. She looked like a strong breeze might knock her over, let alone survive the brutal realities of one of the most dangerous forward operating bases in the entire theater of operations. Her battle-worn ACS hung loose on her small frame, making her appear even more diminutive against the backdrop of towering mountains and heavily fortified defensive positions that surrounded the base. The standard-issue body armor seemed to engulf her petite figure, and her helmet looked oversized for her delicate features. She carried her gear with obvious effort, struggling slightly with the weight of equipment that her male counterparts handled with ease. Her movements were careful and measured, suggesting someone who had learned to compensate for physical limitations through methodical planning and conservative energy expenditure. What struck the assembled soldiers wasn't just her unexpectedly small stature, though that certainly commanded attention in an environment where physical presence often determined respect and survival. It was the complete disconnect between her appearance and the reputation that had preceded her arrival. The deployment roster had listed Staff Sergeant Chen as a decorated combat veteran with multiple tours, but looking at her now, struggling to adjust her oversized pack while other soldiers towered around her like giants, it seemed impossible that she could have survived even basic training, much less the kind of intense combat operations that her service record suggested. The contrast was jarring and unmistakable. FOB Thunderbolt housed some of the most physically imposing soldiers in the U.S. Army, men and women who had been selected for this assignment based on their ability to operate effectively in one of the world's most challenging combat environments. The base sat at 8,500 feet above sea level, surrounded by hostile territory where Taliban fighters used the mountainous terrain to launch devastating attacks against American forces. Every soldier stationed here had proven their capability to carry heavy loads across treacherous terrain, engage enemy forces in brutal firefights, and maintain operational effectiveness under conditions that broke lesser warriors. Maya's fellow passengers on the transport helicopter watched with barely concealed amusement as she gathered her equipment with the deliberate movements of someone who had learned not to waste energy on unnecessary motions. Her rifle case seemed almost comically large compared to her small hands, and the additional ammunition she carried appeared to weigh nearly as much as she did. Several soldiers exchanged glances and poorly suppressed grins as they observed her careful approach to managing gear that they could handle effortlessly. Private First Class Jake Morrison, a 6'4" former college football player from Texas, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking as he watched Maya struggle to organize her equipment. "Are you sure that helicopter didn't make a wrong turn and drop off someone's little sister by mistake?" His comment drew immediate laughter from the soldiers gathered around the landing zone, who were still trying to process the disconnect between Maya's appearance and her supposed combat credentials. Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez, a stocky infantryman with 3 combat deployments under his belt, shook his head in disbelief as he watched Maya's methodical equipment check. The woman looked like she belonged in an office cubicle, not a forward operating base where survival often depended on physical strength, endurance, and the ability to intimidate enemies through sheer presence. Her soft features and almost scholarly demeanor seemed completely at odds with the harsh realities of mountain warfare, where soldiers regularly engaged in hand-to-hand combat with fighters who had been hardened by decades of conflict. The receiving party at FOB Thunderbolt included First Sergeant Michael Barnes, a grizzled veteran with 22 years of service who had seen every type of soldier imaginable. Barnes prided himself on his ability to assess combat effectiveness within minutes of meeting new personnel, and his initial evaluation of Maya was not encouraging. Her handshake was firm, but obviously required effort, and her voice carried a quiet professionalism that suggested competence in administrative functions rather than the aggressive confidence that characterized elite combat soldiers. Maya's arrival coincided with the afternoon briefing session, where soldiers gathered to discuss intelligence updates, mission planning, and tactical considerations for ongoing operations in the surrounding mountains. As she entered the briefing tent, conversations gradually died down as soldiers took notice of the newcomer, who seemed so obviously out of place among the battle-hardened warriors who called Forward Thunderbolt home. The tent was filled with soldiers, whose physical presence commanded immediate attention. Staff Sergeant David Kim, a former Army Ranger, stood 6'1" with arms that looked like they could bend steel bars, and a chest that strained against his uniform. Corporal Lisa Washington, one of only 4 women stationed at the base, was 5'8", with the kind of athletic build that came from years of competitive powerlifting and military conditioning. Even the smaller soldiers at Forward Thunderbolt possessed the kind of wiry strength and aggressive bearing that marked them as dangerous opponents in any confrontation. Maya found an empty seat near the back of the tent, her small frame nearly disappearing among the larger soldiers surrounding her. She opened a worn notebook and began taking notes with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to detailed record-keeping. But her scholarly approach to the briefing only reinforced the impression that she was better suited for desk duty than frontline combat operations. Captain Sarah Mendez, the intelligence officer conducting the briefing, noticed Maya's arrival and paused to acknowledge the new addition to their unit. Staff Sergeant Chen, welcome to Forward Thunderbolt. I trust your journey wasn't too difficult. Her tone was professional but carried the subtle condescension that military personnel often used when addressing colleagues they perceived as being in over their heads. Maya's response was quiet and respectful, confirming her safe arrival and expressing appreciation for the briefing opportunity. Her voice lacked the aggressive edge that characterized most soldiers who had proven themselves in combat, and her deferential manner suggested someone who was still trying to find her place in a world where confidence and physical presence often determined hierarchy and respect. The briefing continued with discussions of recent enemy activity in the surrounding mountains, including several attacks on supply convoys and reconnaissance patrols that had resulted in American casualties. The soldiers listening to these updates responded with the kind of professional interest that came from knowing they would soon be facing similar dangers themselves. Maya took detailed notes throughout the presentation, but her academic approach to intelligence gathering seemed to confirm that she was more comfortable with theoretical analysis than practical application. As the briefing concluded and soldiers began filing out of the tent, conversations immediately turned to speculation about Maya's background and qualifications. Her service record indicated combat experience, but looking at her now, struggling to manage her equipment while soldiers half again, her size moved with easy confidence. It seemed impossible that she could have survived the kind of intense firefights that had become routine at Forward Thunderbolt. Sergeant Rodriguez approached Private Morrison with the expression of someone who had just witnessed something that defied logical explanation. Did you see the way she was taking notes during that briefing? Like she was attending a college lecture instead of preparing for combat operations. How the hell did someone like that end up at a forward operating base? Morrison nodded his agreement, while watching Maya carefully organize her gear with the methodical precision of someone who had learned that attention to detail could compensate for physical limitations. Maybe she's here for administrative support or something. There's no way command would send someone that small to a combat assignment, especially not here where we're getting hit almost daily. The speculation about Maya's true role at Forward Thunderbolt spread rapidly through the base's informal communication network. Soldiers who had been expecting a seasoned combat veteran found themselves trying to reconcile Maya's obvious physical limitations with service records that suggested extensive battlefield experience. The disconnect was so pronounced that many began to suspect administrative errors or mistaken identity, rather than accepting that someone so small and seemingly fragile could have earned combat decorations. Corporal Washington, who had fought hard to earn respect in the male-dominated infantry community, felt a mixture of embarrassment and concern watching Maya's arrival. As one of the few women at Forward Thunderbolt, Washington understood the additional scrutiny that female soldiers faced, and the importance of maintaining standards that proved women could perform at the same level as their male counterparts. Maya's obvious physical limitations threatened to reinforce stereotypes about female combat effectiveness that Washington had spent years working to overcome. The equipment that Maya carried provided additional grounds for skepticism among soldiers, who prided themselves on using the most advanced weapons and gear available. Her rifle appeared to be a standard M4 carbine without the specialized modifications that most soldiers at FOB Thunderbolt considered essential for effective combat operations. Her optics were basic military issue rather than the enhanced systems that experienced soldiers typically acquired through personal purchase or special requisitions. Maya's gear selection suggested either inexperience with combat requirements or inability to afford the equipment upgrades that serious soldiers considered necessary for survival in hostile environments. Her tactical vest showed signs of wear, but lacked the additional pouches, communications equipment, and specialized accessories that characterized the loadouts of soldiers who had learned through hard experience what they needed to stay alive and fight effectively. The physical challenges that Maya would face at Forward Thunderbolt were immediately apparent to everyone who observed her arrival. The base's location in mountainous terrain required soldiers to carry heavy loads across difficult ground while maintaining combat readiness. Supply runs, patrol operations, and defensive positions all demanded the kind of physical strength and endurance that Maya's small frame seemed incapable of providing. Even basic tasks like manning defensive positions required soldiers to move quickly while carrying equipment that weighed nearly as much as Maya's entire body. The machine guns used for base defense were heavy weapons that required significant strength to operate effectively, and the ammunition for these systems came in containers that most soldiers struggled to carry, even with their superior size and conditioning. Maya's sleeping quarters assignment placed her in a tent with 3 other soldiers, including Corporal Washington and 2 male infantrymen who had been at Forward Thunderbolt since the beginning of the deployment. The cramped conditions provided no privacy and constant opportunities for her tentmates to observe her adaptation to base life. Her struggles with basic tasks like organizing her gear and maintaining her equipment were immediately apparent to soldiers who performed these same functions effortlessly. The dining facility conversations that evening centered heavily on speculation about Maya's background and the circumstances that had brought her to Forward Thunderbolt. Soldiers who had been expecting reinforcement from experienced combat veterans found themselves wondering whether Maya's arrival represented some kind of administrative mistake or policy experiment that would compromise their unit's combat effectiveness. First Sergeant Barnes found himself in the uncomfortable position of trying to integrate a soldier whose qualifications remained unclear despite official documentation that suggested extensive combat experience. Maya's paperwork was in perfect order, her security clearances were appropriate for the mission, and her service record included decorations that indicated proven performance under fire. However, the disconnect between her documentation and her obvious physical limitations created doubt about her ability to contribute meaningfully to FOB Thunderbolt's mission. The evening briefing session provided Maya with her first opportunity to observe the tactical challenges that Forward Thunderbolt faced on a daily basis. Intelligence reports described enemy positions in the surrounding mountains, supply route vulnerabilities, and patrol schedules that required soldiers to operate in terrain where Taliban fighters held significant advantages. The briefing officers Descriptions of recent firefights emphasized the physical demands of combat operations at high altitude, where soldiers needed exceptional conditioning to maintain effectiveness while carrying heavy equipment across treacherous ground. Maya listened to these briefings with the same methodical attention she had shown during her arrival, taking detailed notes and asking occasional questions that demonstrated understanding of tactical concepts, but revealed no obvious expertise in practical application. Her questions were intelligent but theoretical, suggesting someone who understood combat operations intellectually but lacked the hard-won experience that came from surviving actual firefights. The contrast between Maya's scholarly approach and the practical expertise of her fellow soldiers became more pronounced as the evening progressed. When discussions turned to specific tactical scenarios, soldiers shared experiences and insights that reflected years of combat operations and hard-learned lessons about survival in hostile environments. Maya contributed nothing to these conversations, neither sharing experiences of her own nor offering tactical insights that might have justified her presence among such experienced warriors. Forward Operating Base Thunderbolt represented the pinnacle of American military engineering and tactical positioning in one of the world's most challenging combat environments. Carved into the rocky mountainside an elevation that left even seasoned soldiers gasping for breath during their first weeks of acclimatization, the base commanded a strategic view of three major valley systems that served as primary infiltration routes for Taliban fighters moving between Pakistan and their operational areas deep within Afghanistan. The construction of Forward Thunderbolt had required 18 months of intensive engineering work, with materials and equipment transported by helicopter through some of the most dangerous airspace in the Afghan theater. Combat engineers had blasted defensive positions directly into the mountain rock, creating interlocking fields of fire that could devastate any attacking force foolish enough to assault the position. The base's perimeter defenses included automated weapon systems, motion sensors, and thermal imaging equipment that provided 360-degree surveillance coverage of the surrounding terrain. Every structure at Forward Thunderbolt had been designed with combat effectiveness as the primary consideration. The command bunker was buried 20 feet underground, protected by reinforced concrete and steel that could withstand direct hits from rocket-propelled grenades and mortar. Communication arrays were hardened against electromagnetic pulses and equipped with redundant systems that ensured continuous contact with higher headquarters, even during the most intense enemy attacks. The base's tactical operations center resembled something from a science fiction movie, with multiple large-screen displays showing real-time intelligence feeds from unmanned aerial vehicles, satellite imagery, and ground sensors positioned throughout the surrounding mountains. Digital mapping systems provided three-dimensional terrain analysis that allowed commanders to plan operations with precision that would have been impossible just a generation earlier. The technology represented millions of dollars in research and development, creating capabilities that gave American forces decisive advantages over enemies who relied on outdated equipment and primitive tactics. Living conditions at Forward Thunderbolt reflected the harsh realities of mountain warfare in a region where temperatures could swing from scorching heat during the day to near-freezing conditions at night. Soldiers occupied reinforced bunkers that provided protection from indirect fire while offering minimal comfort beyond basic survival requirements. The altitude made every physical activity more demanding, and the thin air left even well-conditioned soldiers struggling to maintain performance levels they could achieve effortlessly at sea level. Water and food supplies arrived by helicopter convoy under constant threat of enemy attack, making every meal and shower a reminder of the logistical challenges involved in sustaining military operations in such remote terrain. The base's medical facilities were equipped to handle trauma cases that would challenge major hospitals, staffed by combat medics who had learned to perform life-saving procedures under conditions that civilian doctors could barely imagine. The soldiers assigned to Forward Thunderbolt represented the elite of American military forces, selected through rigorous screening processes that evaluated not just their combat skills, but their ability to function effectively in the isolated, high-stress environment that characterized mountain warfare. Each man and woman stationed at the base had proven their capability through multiple deployments, specialized training programs, and performance under fire that demonstrated their readiness to operate at the very edge of human endurance. Physical conditioning standards at Forward Thunderbolt exceeded normal military requirements by significant margins. Soldiers needed this strength to carry equipment loads exceeding their body weight across terrain that challenged even experienced mountaineers. They required cardiovascular fitness that allowed them to maintain combat effectiveness while operating at altitudes that left most people barely able to walk. The combination of physical demands and combat stress created an environment where only the strongest and most adaptable soldiers could succeed. The weapon systems available to Forward Thunderbolt's defenders represented the cutting edge of military technology. Squad automatic weapons provided suppressive fire capabilities that could dominate entire valley systems, while precision rifles, equipped with advanced optics, allowed designated marksmen to engage targets at ranges exceeding a mile. Heavy machine guns mounted in defensive positions could deliver devastating firepower against massed enemy attacks, and mortar systems provided indirect fire support that could reach any location within a 10-kilometer radius of the base. Intelligence gathering capabilities at Forward Thunderbolt included sophisticated electronic surveillance systems that could intercept enemy communications, track movement patterns, and predict attack timing with remarkable accuracy. Unmanned aerial vehicles provided continuous overhead coverage, transmitting high-definition video feeds that allowed commanders to observe enemy activities in real time and coordinate responses with precision that had revolutionized modern warfare. Base's communications infrastructure enabled instant coordination with air support assets stationed hundreds of miles away, calling in precision airstrikes, medical evacuations, and supply drops with efficiency that often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Satellite uplinks provided secure communications with Pentagon officials, allowing tactical commanders to receive strategic guidance and policy updates within minutes of their development. Training facilities at Forward Thunderbolt included firing ranges that replicated the challenging conditions soldiers would face during actual combat operations. Indoor ranges allowed for weapons maintenance and marksmanship practice regardless of weather conditions, while outdoor courses provided realistic scenarios that tested soldiers' ability to engage targets while moving across difficult terrain. Under simulated enemy fire, the base's location in the Hindu Kush mountain range placed it at the center of some of the most intense fighting in the entire Afghan conflict. Taliban forces used the surrounding peaks as staging areas for attacks against American supply convoys, and the difficult terrain provided numerous hiding places for enemy fighters who could observe American activities and plan ambush with deadly effectiveness. The tactical challenges faced by Forward Thunderbolt's garrison required constant vigilance and the ability to respond instantly to threats that could emerge from any direction. Supply operations supporting Forward Thunderbolt involved helicopter flights through mountain passes where enemy fighters regularly positioned surface-to-air missiles and heavy machine guns. Pilots flying these missions needed exceptional skill and courage, navigating through terrain that left no room for error while under fire from weapon systems that could destroy their aircraft with a single well-placed shot. The logistical complexity of maintaining combat operations at such a remote location required coordination between multiple military branches and constant adaptation to changing threat conditions. Medical evacuation procedures from Forward Thunderbolt demanded specialized training and equipment that could function in conditions where conventional rescue operations would be impossible. Helicopter crews needed to land in areas where enemy fire was likely, extract wounded soldiers under combat conditions, and provide medical care during flights through terrain that challenged even the most experienced pilots. The medical facilities at nearby bases had learned to expect trauma cases that tested their capabilities and required immediate intervention to prevent preventable deaths. The psychological demands of assignment to FOB Thunderbolt were as challenging as the physical requirements. Soldiers lived with the constant knowledge that they were surrounded by enemy forces who had spent years learning to use the terrain to their advantage. Every patrol outside the base's perimeter involved the possibility of ambush, improvised explosive devices, or direct assault by fighters who knew the ground intimately and could disappear into terrain that offered countless hiding places. Combat operations from FOB Thunderbolt typically involved small unit actions in terrain where traditional military advantages were neutralized by environmental factors that favored defenders who had grown up in the mountains. American technological superiority meant little when enemies could position themselves in locations that were invisible to most surveillance systems and could engage American forces at ranges where superior training and equipment provided minimal advantages. Staff Sergeant David Kim commanded respect through pure physical presence and a combat record that read like something from an action movie. Standing 6'1", with shoulders that seemed to fill doorways and arms covered in tattoos documenting his service with the 75th Ranger Regiment, Kim represented everything that soldiers at FOB Thunderbolt aspired to become. His custom-modified M4 carbine featured precision components that had cost him nearly $4,000 of his own money, including a barrel that had been hand-lapped by a master gunsmith in Colorado and an optical system that could resolve targets clearly. At distances exceeding 800 meters, Kim's equipment bag contained accessories that reflected 8 years of combat experience across 3 different theaters of operation. His tactical vest was arranged with the methodical precision of someone who had learned that equipment placement could mean the difference between life and death in a firefight. Extra magazines were positioned for instant access during reloads. Medical supplies were organized for immediate use under stress, and communications equipment was configured to provide seamless coordination with supporting elements during complex operations. The respect that Kim enjoyed among his peers had been earned through demonstrated performance in situations where lesser soldiers had broken under pressure. His confirmed kill count exceeded 40 enemy fighters, achieved during close-quarters battles in urban environments where split-second decisions determined survival. Fellow soldiers sought his advice on equipment selection, tactical procedures, and combat techniques because his recommendations came from hard-won experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Kim's confidence was evident in every aspect of his bearing and behavior. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who had never encountered a physical challenge he couldn't master, and his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to having his tactical assessments accepted without question. Other soldiers automatically deferred to his expertise during planning sessions and equipment discussions because his track record of success spoke louder than any formal rank structure. Corporal Lisa Washington had fought harder than any of her male counterparts to earn recognition in the infantry community, and her achievements reflected determination that bordered on obsession. At 5'8", with an athletic build that came from years of competitive powerlifting, Washington could carry equipment loads that challenged soldiers significantly larger than herself and could maintain combat effectiveness during operations that left men with superior size and conditioning struggling to keep pace. Washington's service record included decorations for valor that few soldiers ever achieved, earned during a firefight in Iraq where she had single-handedly held a defensive position against overwhelming enemy forces until reinforcements could arrive. Her actions had saved the lives of 12 wounded soldiers who would have been overrun without her intervention, and the enemy casualties she inflicted during that engagement had earned her recognition from commanders who rarely acknowledged individual contributions in official reports. The equipment that Washington carried reflected her scientific approach to combat effectiveness and her refusal to accept any disadvantage that could be overcome through superior preparation. Her rifle featured modifications that she had researched extensively, including a trigger system that provided consistent performance under varying environmental conditions and an optical sight that maintained zero regardless of temperature fluctuations or physical impacts that would compromise lesser systems. Washington's tactical vest contained medical supplies that exceeded standard requirements, reflecting her training as a combat medic and her determination to provide life-saving care to wounded soldiers regardless of the tactical situation. Her communications equipment included backup systems that ensured she could maintain contact with supporting elements, even if primary systems failed, and her navigation tools provided redundant capabilities that allowed her to operate effectively in terrain where GPS signals were unreliable. The respect that Washington commanded among her male peers had been earned through performance that consistently exceeded their own achievements. Her physical conditioning allowed her to outperform larger soldiers during demanding training exercises, and her tactical knowledge reflected study and preparation that put less dedicated soldiers to shame. Fellow infantrymen considered assignment to Washington's team to be a career-enhancing opportunity because her leadership consistently produced successful outcomes in challenging situations. Sergeant Tommy Rodriguez brought 15 years of infantry experience to every operation he participated in, including combat deployments that had taken him from the streets of Baghdad to the mountains of Afghanistan. His stocky build concealed strength that allowed him to carry loads that would break lesser soldiers, and his weathered features reflected exposure to environmental conditions that had tested his endurance in ways that civilian life could never replicate. Rodriguez's weapon was a work of art that reflected his obsessive attention to detail and his understanding that equipment reliability could determine survival in critical moments. Every component had been selected based on extensive testing under harsh conditions, and his maintenance procedures followed standards that exceeded manufacturer recommendations. His rifle could deliver precise shots after being submerged in mud, exposed to extreme temperatures, or subjected to impacts that would disable most weapon systems. The tactical experience that Rodriguez possessed extended beyond individual marksmanship to include expertise in small unit operations, urban warfare, and mountain combat techniques that had been refined through countless engagements with enemy forces. His ability to read terrain and predict enemy behavior had saved lives during operations where less experienced soldiers would have led their teams into deadly ambushes. Rodriguez's leadership style combined aggressive tactical thinking with careful attention to soldier welfare and equipment maintenance. His teams consistently achieved mission objectives while suffering fewer casualties than units led by less experienced leaders, and his ability to adapt quickly to changing tactical situations had earned recognition from commanders who valued results over procedural compliance. First Sergeant Michael Barnes embodied 22 years of military evolution, having served during the transition from Cold War operations to the complex counterinsurgency campaigns that defined modern warfare. His presence commanded immediate attention, not through physical intimidation, but through the quiet confidence of someone who had seen every conceivable tactical situation and had learned to maintain effectiveness regardless of circumstances. Barnes' equipment reflected practical experience rather than expensive modifications, featuring components that had proven their reliability through extensive field use rather than impressive specifications. His rifle was configured for versatility rather than specialized performance, capable of effective engagement at various ranges while maintaining the simplicity that allowed for field maintenance under conditions where complex systems would fail. Tactical knowledge that Barnes possessed encompassed not just individual combat skills, but understanding of logistics, personnel management, and operational planning that allowed him to coordinate complex missions involving multiple supporting elements. His ability to anticipate problems and implement solutions before they became critical had prevented numerous operations from ending in disaster. Barnes' mentorship had shaped the careers of dozens of soldiers who had served under his leadership, and his recommendations carried weight with promotion boards and assignment officers throughout the Army. Soldiers competed for opportunities to serve in units under his command because his leadership consistently produced career advancement and professional development that prepared them for increased responsibilities. Captain Sarah Mendez represented the new generation of military intelligence officers who combined traditional analytical skills with technological capabilities that had revolutionized battlefield awareness. Her academic credentials included advanced degrees in international relations and Middle Eastern studies, but her practical experience encompassed 3 combat deployments, where her intelligence assessments had guided successful operations against sophisticated enemy networks. Mendez's intelligence analysis capabilities were enhanced by access to surveillance systems and data processing tools, provided unprecedented insights into enemy activities and intentions. Her ability to correlate information from multiple sources and identify patterns that revealed operational vulnerabilities had contributed to tactical successes that had disrupted enemy operations throughout her area of responsibility. The briefings that Mendez conducted combined technical expertise with clear communication that allowed soldiers at all levels to understand complex tactical situations and make informed decisions during high-stress operations. Her intelligence products consistently provided actionable information that enhanced mission effectiveness while minimizing risks to American personnel. These elite soldiers had created a culture at Forward Thunderbolt that valued proven performance, technological superiority, and aggressive tactical thinking. Their combined experience encompassed successful operations in every type of terrain and against every variety of enemy force that American military personnel had encountered during 2 decades of continuous warfare. Their confidence was built on demonstrated success in situations where failure meant death, and their expertise was validated by results that spoke louder than any formal credentials. The whispered comments about Maya's suitability for combat operations began during her first morning at Forward Thunderbolt, when soldiers gathered in the mess tent for breakfast observed her struggling to carry her food tray while managing her rifle and equipment. Staff Sergeant Kim watched with barely concealed amusement as Maya carefully navigated between tables, her small frame dwarfed by soldiers who moved with the easy confidence of warriors who had never questioned their physical dominance in any environment. "Look at her trying to balance that tray," Kim muttered to Rodriguez, loud enough for nearby soldiers to hear. "She's moving like she's afraid the wind might knock her over. How is someone that small supposed to carry wounded soldiers to safety or haul ammunition during a firefight?" His observation drew approving nods from soldiers who shared his concerns about Maya's obvious physical limitations in an environment where strength and endurance often determine survival. Rodriguez joined the commentary with his own assessment of Maya's apparent vulnerabilities. "I've seen high school kids with more presence than she's showing. Look at the way she holds her rifle, like she's carrying someone else's equipment, instead of weapons she's supposed to be ready to fight with. This isn't summer camp, and we can't afford to babysit someone who doesn't belong here." The criticism escalated during the morning equipment inspection, when Maya's methodical approach to weapons maintenance drew attention from soldiers who prided themselves on efficient procedures that maximized preparation time, while other soldiers completed their inspections in minutes. Maya spent nearly 20 minutes carefully examining every component of her rifle with the deliberate movements of someone who had learned to compensate for physical limitations through obsessive attention to detail. Private Morrison approached Maya's position during the inspection period with the expression of someone offering helpful guidance to a confused newcomer. "Ma'am, I don't mean to interfere, but you're taking way too long with that inspection. In combat situations, you need to be able to perform those procedures quickly and move on to other tasks. The enemy isn't going to wait while you check every screw and spring." Maya's response was polite but brief, acknowledging Morrison's advice while continuing her methodical inspection process. Her refusal to modify her procedures based on his suggestions only reinforced his belief that she lacked the tactical understanding necessary for effective combat operations. Morrison shared his frustration with nearby soldiers, building consensus that Maya's presence represented a liability that could compromise their unit's effectiveness. Corporal Washington found herself torn between sympathy for another female soldier and professional concern about Maya's apparent inability to meet the physical demands that characterized life at Forward Thunderbolt. During the afternoon training session, Washington watched Maya struggle to keep pace during a conditioning run that other soldiers completed easily, falling behind despite obvious effort that left her breathing heavily and showing signs of exhaustion. That would be dangerous during actual combat operations. "I hate to say this about another woman," Washington confided to her tent mate later that evening, "but she's making all of us look bad. I've worked too hard to earn respect here to watch someone who can't handle basic physical requirements undermine everything we've accomplished. Maybe there's a support role where her limitations wouldn't matter, but she doesn't belong in a combat assignment." The mockery became more open during weapons training exercises, when Maya's shooting position drew critical comments from soldiers who considered marksmanship to be a fundamental skill that separated competent soldiers from recreational enthusiasts. Her stance appeared textbook correct, but lacked the aggressive confidence that characterized elite shooters, and her trigger control seemed hesitant rather than decisive. "She's shooting like she's afraid the rifle might bite her," observed Sergeant Martinez, a designated marksman whose own shooting skills had earned recognition at multiple military competitions. "Look at that flinch when she fires. That's not combat shooting. That's someone who learned on civilian ranges where they never had to worry about return fire or time pressure. No way she could engage targets effectively during a real firefight." First, Sergeant Barnes watched Maya's performance during training exercises with growing concern about the administrative decisions that had resulted in her assignment to Forward Thunderbolt. Her service record suggested combat experience, but her demonstrated capabilities seemed inconsistent with operations that required soldiers to function effectively under conditions that challenged even experienced warriors. Barnes approached Maya during a break in training activities, his tone professional, but carrying the subtle condescension that military leaders often used when addressing personnel they considered to be in over their heads. "Staff Sergeant Chen, I need to ask you directly about your previous combat experience. Your performance suggests you might be more comfortable in a support role rather than direct combat operations." Maya's response was respectful but provided no specific details about her background or qualifications, leaving Barnes more confused about her true capabilities and the circumstances that had brought her to their forward operating base. Her evasiveness regarding her combat experience only reinforced suspicions that her service record might contain errors or exaggerations that didn't reflect actual battlefield performance. The dining facility became a venue for increasingly harsh commentary about Maya's suitability for military service, with soldiers sharing observations about her apparent weaknesses and speculating about the political considerations that might have resulted in her assignment to a combat unit. The conversations grew louder as soldiers became more comfortable expressing doubts about her capabilities. Captain Mendez found herself in an awkward position during intelligence briefings, where Maya's presence created distraction as soldiers focused more on her apparent inadequacies than on tactical information that could determine mission success. Mendez noticed that Maya asked few questions during briefings and offered no insights based on supposed combat experience. reinforcing impressions that she lacked the background necessary to contribute meaningfully to operational planning. "I don't understand how she got clearance for this assignment," Mendez confided to Barnes after a particularly uncomfortable briefing session. "Her questions suggest theoretical knowledge rather than practical experience, and she doesn't contribute anything that indicates she's actually been in combat situations. Maybe there's been some kind of administrative mistake that needs to be corrected before we deploy her on actual operations." The mockery reached new levels during physical training sessions, where Maya's struggles with basic exercises provided entertainment for soldiers who completed the same tasks effortlessly. Her inability to perform pull-ups, push-ups, and other strength exercises at levels expected from combat soldiers became sources of amusement rather than concern, with soldiers making jokes about her fitness level and speculating about how she had passed basic training requirements. "$10 says she can't complete a single pull-up," whispered Private Johnson during morning PT, loud enough for Maya to overhear. "Maybe we should start a betting pool on how long she lasts before requesting transfer to a desk job where she belongs." His suggestion drew approving laughter from soldiers who viewed Maya's presence as confirmation that military standards had been compromised by political considerations. The criticism became personal during off-duty conversations, where soldiers questioned not just Maya's capabilities, but her motivations for seeking combat assignments that seemed so obviously beyond her physical limitations. Some suggested that she was using military service for career advancement rather than genuine commitment to mission accomplishment, while others speculated that her assignment represented social engineering that prioritized political correctness over combat effectiveness. Maya's responses to the growing chorus of criticism remained consistently professional and restrained, neither defending her qualifications nor acknowledging the validity of concerns about her apparent limitations. Her calm acceptance of mockery that would have prompted angry responses from most soldiers only reinforced impressions that she lacked the aggressive personality traits that characterized effective combat leaders. The psychological pressure of constant criticism began affecting other aspects of base operations, as soldiers spent increasing amounts of time discussing Maya's deficiencies rather than focusing on training and preparation activities that were essential for mission success. Her presence had become a distraction that was undermining unit cohesion and diverting attention from tactical concerns that could determine survival during actual combat operations. Staff Sergeant Kim's assessment of the situation reflected the growing consensus among Forward Thunderbolt soldiers that Maya's assignment represented a dangerous mistake that needed to be corrected before it compromised their unit's effectiveness. "We're supposed to be an elite combat unit, not a social experiment," he declared during an informal gathering. "Someone needs to recognize that good intentions don't stop bullets, and sending people into combat situations they can't handle isn't doing anyone any favors." Maya's first official evaluation at Forward Thunderbolt came during the weekly marksmanship assessment, where soldiers were required to demonstrate proficiency with their assigned weapons at various distances under simulated combat conditions. The results were devastating to any remaining credibility she might have possessed among her peers. While Staff Sergeant Kim achieved a perfect score of 40 out of 40 possible points, and even the lowest performing soldier in the unit managed 35 points, Maya's score of 28 placed her well below the minimum standard considered acceptable for combat operations. The shooting positions that challenged Maya most severely were those requiring physical strength and stability that her small frame simply couldn't provide. During the prone supported firing position, where soldiers were expected to engage targets at 300 meters while carrying full combat loads, Maya's rifle wavered noticeably as she struggled to maintain sight alignment while supporting the weapon's weight for extended periods. Her shots scattered across the target face in patterns that suggested fundamental problems with shooting fundamentals rather than simple nervousness or unfamiliarity. Sergeant Martinez observed, Maya's performance through high-powered spotting. Scopes, documenting each shot placement with the clinical precision of someone conducting a professional assessment. "Look at that group size," he commented to nearby soldiers, pointing to Maya's target where bullet holes were spread across an area. "That would encompass a human torso, rather than concentrating in the vital zones that marked effective combat shooting. Those patterns wouldn't stop an enemy fighter even if she managed to hit him. And half her shots are missing the silhouette entirely." The standing, unsupported position proved even more challenging for Maya, as her small stature made it difficult to achieve the stable shooting platform that larger soldiers could establish naturally. Her attempts to compensate by adjusting her stance and grip only resulted in more erratic shot placement, and the time required for her to achieve acceptable sight picture exceeded the limits that would be available during actual combat engagements. Captain Mendez watched the evaluation with growing concern about the liability that Maya's poor performance represented for any unit that might depend on her marksmanship during critical situations. The intelligence officer had seen combat footage showing how quickly firefights developed and how little time soldiers had to engage targets before enemy forces could return effective fire. Maya's deliberate shooting style might be acceptable for recreational target shooting, but it was completely inadequate for the split-second engagements that characterized modern warfare. Physical fitness assessments conducted the following day provided additional confirmation of Maya's inability to meet the demands that characterized military service at Forward Thunderbolt. The Army physical fitness test revealed deficiencies that would have prevented her from passing basic training requirements. At most installations, her push-up count of 15 fell well short of the minimum standard of 35 required for female soldiers in her age group, and her performance became increasingly labored as the 2-minute time limit progressed. The sit-up portion of the assessment showed similar deficiencies, with Maya completing only 42 repetitions compared to the minimum requirement of 57. Her form deteriorated significantly during the final 30 seconds, and observers noted that several of her repetitions failed to meet the technical standards that ensured the exercise was testing actual abdominal strength, rather than compensatory movements. The 2-mile run proved most devastating to Maya's credibility among soldiers who prided themselves on cardiovascular fitness that allowed them to operate effectively at high altitude while carrying heavy combat loads. Her time of 18 minutes and 37 seconds was nearly 3 minutes, slower than the maximum allowed for passing the assessment, and she required medical attention afterward due to symptoms consistent with altitude sickness and heat exhaustion. First Sergeant Barnes documented Maya's test results with the methodical precision required for official personnel actions, but his professional demeanor couldn't conceal his disappointment in performance that fell so far short of standards expected from soldiers assigned to elite combat units. The results would require formal reporting to higher headquarters and could initiate administrative procedures that might result in Maya's removal from combat duty. "These scores aren't just below standard," Barnes explained to Captain Mendez during their private discussion of Maya's evaluation results. "They're at levels that would require immediate remedial training for any soldier. And honestly, I don't think remedial training can address limitations that appear to be physical rather than procedural. We might be looking at a medical evaluation to determine if she's fit for any kind of military duty." Tactical exercises conducted during the following week provided additional evidence of Maya's inability to function effectively in the combat environment that characterized operations from Forward Thunderbolt. During a simulated patrol exercise designed to test soldiers' ability to move across difficult terrain while maintaining combat readiness, Maya fell behind the patrol formation within the first 30 minutes, creating gaps that would have exposed the unit to enemy observation and attack. Her struggles with the terrain were immediately apparent to soldiers who had learned to navigate the same ground while carrying equipment loads that exceeded Maya's body weight. The rocky slopes and narrow paths that characterized the area around Forward Thunderbolt required sure footing and the sheer footing and the physical strength to recover quickly from stumbles or slips that could be fatal during actual combat operations. Corporal Washington found herself assigned as Maya's partner during buddy team exercises, creating an awkward situation where she was forced to compensate for Maya's limitations while maintaining the aggressive tempo that characterized effective small unit operations. Washington's attempts to provide guidance and support only highlighted the extent of Maya's deficiencies and created safety concerns that could compromise both soldiers' survival during actual combat. "I can't carry her and fight effectively at the same time," Washington confided to Staff Sergeant Kim during a break in training activities. "If we encounter enemy contact during a real patrol, I'm going to have to choose between helping her and engaging targets. That's not a position any soldier should be put in, and it's not fair to ask me to compromise my own effectiveness to compensate for someone who shouldn't be here." Equipment management exercises revealed additional problems with Maya's ability to function as an effective member of a combat unit. Her struggles with basic tasks like loading ammunition, performing communications procedures, and maintaining her weapons under field conditions suggested deficiencies that extended beyond physical limitations to include fundamental gaps in military training and experience. The night vision exercises that tested soldiers' ability to operate effectively during hours of darkness when most combat operations occurred showed Maya's limitations most clearly. Her difficulty adjusting to reduced visibility conditions and her obvious discomfort with the disorienting effects of night vision equipment created safety hazards that could endanger entire patrol formations during actual operations. Maya's performance during medical training scenarios designed to test soldiers' ability to provide life-saving care to wounded comrades under combat conditions was particularly concerning to instructors who understood that battlefield medical care often determined survival outcomes. Her struggles with basic procedures like establishing intravenous lines, treating traumatic injuries, and evacuating casualties under simulated enemy fire suggested deficiencies that could prove fatal during actual combat operations. The collective assessment from training cadre and experienced soldiers was unanimous. Maya lacked the physical capabilities, technical skills, and tactical understanding necessary for effective performance in the combat environment that characterized operations. From Forward Thunderbolt, her presence represented a liability that could compromise mission success and endanger the lives of soldiers who depended on every team member to contribute effectively during critical situations. Sergeant Rodriguez summarized the prevailing opinion during an informal gathering of senior enlisted personnel. "Look, nobody wants to see anyone fail, but we can't ignore reality. She's not meeting any of the standards we use to measure combat readiness, and making excuses or lowering requirements isn't going to help her or protect the soldiers who might have to depend on her during a firefight." The documentation of Maya's poor performance was becoming extensive, with formal evaluations, training records, and instructor comments all pointing toward the same conclusion. Her assignment to Forward Thunderbolt represented an administrative error that needed to be corrected before it resulted in casualties that could have been prevented through proper personnel placement. Maya's response to the mounting evidence of her inadequate performance remained consistently calm and professional, showing no signs of the frustration or defensive behavior that might have been expected from someone facing such comprehensive criticism of their military capabilities. Her acceptance of poor evaluation results and constructive criticism only reinforced impressions that she understood her limitations, but lacked the motivation or ability to address them effectively. The emergency briefing that summoned all available personnel to the operations center at 0400 hours on Maya's 10th day at FOB Thunderbolt carried the urgent tone that soldiers had learned to associate with developing crisis situations. Captain Mendez stood before the assembled unit with satellite imagery and intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of American forces under siege in terrain that offered few options for conventional rescue operations. A reconnaissance patrol from Bravo Company had been conducting surveillance operations in the Coast Valley when they triggered an improvised explosive device that disabled their primary vehicle and wounded 3 soldiers. The patrol had taken defensive positions in an abandoned compound approximately 8 kilometers from Forward Thunderbolt, but Taliban forces were converging on their location from multiple directions, creating a tactical situation that threatened to result in the complete destruction of the isolated American unit. The geography surrounding the trapped patrol created challenges that conventional rescue operations couldn't address effectively. The compound sat in a valley floor surrounded by steep ridgelines that provided Taliban fighters with commanding fields of fire across any approach route that ground vehicles could use. Helicopter extraction was impossible due to heavy machine gun positions that enemy forces had established on the surrounding high ground, creating interlocking zones of fire that could destroy any aircraft attempting to reach the trapped Americans. Intelligence reports indicated that Taliban commanders had committed significant resources to the operation, viewing the isolated American patrol as an opportunity to achieve a propaganda victory that could demonstrate their ability to defeat supposedly elite American forces. Enemy troop concentrations exceeded normal patterns by substantial margins, with fighters moving into positions that suggested a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm the Americans before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Mendez outlined the tactical options available to Forward Thunderbolt's commanders, none of which offered reasonable chances of success using conventional military approaches. Direct assault across the valley floor would expose rescue forces to devastating enemy fire from elevated positions, while flanking movements would require time that the trapped patrol didn't have. Artillery support was limited by the proximity of American forces to enemy positions, and airstrikes couldn't be employed effectively without risking fratricidal casualties. The situation requires immediate action, Mendez explained to the assembled soldiers. Bravo Company has approximately 6 hours of ammunition remaining, and enemy forces are positioning for what appears to be a final assault. We need to develop options that can neutralize the enemy's positional advantages and create opportunities for successful extraction. Staff Sergeant Kim stepped forward with the confidence of someone accustomed to providing tactical solutions for complex problems. His analysis of the situation reflected years of combat experience and training in special operations techniques that addressed scenarios where conventional approaches proved inadequate. Kim's proposal involved a diversionary assault that would draw enemy attention while specialized teams infiltrated enemy positions to eliminate key weapon systems. The enemy's strength comes from those heavy machine gun positions on the ridgelines, Kim explained, pointing to specific locations on the tactical map. If we can take out the primary gun positions, helicopter extraction becomes feasible. I can lead a team up the eastern approach where the terrain provides cover from observation, and we can engage those positions with precision fire, while the main force creates diversion on the valley floor. Kim's plan represented the kind of aggressive tactical thinking that had earned him recognition throughout his military career, but the terrain analysis revealed significant problems with his proposed approach. The eastern ridgeline required a climbing assault across exposed rock faces, where enemy observers could detect movement from substantial distances, and the timeline for reaching effective firing positions exceeded the time available before enemy forces completed their assault preparations. Sergeant Rodriguez offered an alternative approach, based on his extensive experience with mountain warfare and small unit operations in similar terrain. His plan focused on using indirect fire to suppress enemy positions while ground forces approached under cover of smoke and darkness, but the complexity of coordinating multiple supporting elements created risks that could result in friendly fire casualties or mission failure due to timing errors. We've got mortar that can reach those ridgeline positions, Rodriguez argued, outlining his tactical concept on the map display. Sustained suppressive fire would force the enemy to take cover while our assault teams move into position for direct engagement. The key is maintaining accurate fires that keep their heads down without hitting our own people during the approach. First Sergeant Barnes evaluated both proposals with the analytical approach that characterized his decades of military leadership, identifying strengths and weaknesses that could determine mission success or failure. His assessment focused on practical considerations that academic tactical planning often overlooked, including equipment requirements, personnel capabilities, and environmental factors that could compromise even well-conceived operations. Discussion continued for nearly 30 minutes as soldiers contributed suggestions and refinements to the various tactical options under consideration. Each proposal addressed specific aspects of the challenge while creating new problems that required additional solutions, and the complexity of the situation was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone involved in the planning process. Maya had remained silent throughout the tactical discussion, taking notes in her worn notebook, while listening to proposals that reflected the expertise and experience of soldiers who had proven their capabilities in similar situations. Her lack of participation in the planning process reinforced impressions that she possessed neither the tactical knowledge nor the practical experience necessary to contribute meaningfully to complex military operations that Captain Mendez was preparing. To make final decisions about the rescue operation when Maya quietly raised her hand and asked for permission to speak. The request surprised everyone present, as Maya had shown no indication during her time at FOB Thunderbolt that she possessed tactical insights or operational experience that might be relevant to combat planning. "Captain, I'd like to volunteer for a different approach to this problem," Maya said, her voice carrying a quiet confidence that hadn't been apparent during previous interactions. "I believe I can neutralize the enemy positions on the ridgelines, using precision fire from an overwatch position that would allow helicopter extraction without requiring ground assault or diversionary operations." The silence that followed Maya's statement lasted several seconds as soldiers tried to process what they had just heard. The woman who had failed every physical fitness test and demonstrated substandard marksmanship capabilities was volunteering to undertake the most challenging aspect of a complex military operation that had stymied soldiers with decades of combat experience. Staff Sergeant Kim was the first to respond, his tone carrying the kind of professional patience that military leaders used when addressing suggestions that were obviously inappropriate. "Staff Sergeant Chen, I appreciate your willingness to volunteer, but this mission requires capabilities that go beyond standard military training. The shots we're talking about would need to be made at distances exceeding 800 meters in adverse conditions, against hardened positions where accuracy requirements leave no margin for error." Maya's response surprised everyone present by demonstrating detailed knowledge of the tactical situation and the specific challenges that long-range precision fire would need to address. The Overwatch position on Hill 247 provides clear lines of sight to all 3 heavy machine gun positions, she explained, referencing terrain features that weren't marked on the standard tactical maps. Wind conditions at that elevation should remain stable for approximately 4 hours based on current meteorological data, and the range to target varies from 750 to 920 meters depending on specific enemy positions. The technical accuracy of Maya's assessment caught the attention of soldiers who had assumed she lacked the tactical knowledge necessary for operational planning. Her references to specific terrain features and ballistic considerations suggested familiarity with the area that extended beyond the briefing materials available to personnel at FOB Thunderbolt. Corporal Washington voiced the concern that everyone was thinking but hadn't expressed directly. Maya, you've been here for 10 days, and you've struggled with basic marksmanship at 300 meters. The kind of shooting you're describing requires capabilities that even our best marksmen would consider extremely challenging. Are you sure you understand what you're volunteering for? Maya's answer provided the first hint that her background might contain elements that hadn't been apparent during her evaluation period at Forward Thunderbolt. I understand the requirements, she said simply. I also understand that those soldiers don't have time for conventional approaches that might take hours to implement. Sometimes the most direct solution is the most effective one, even if it appears unlikely to succeed. The conviction in Maya's voice created an uncomfortable moment for soldiers who had spent 10 days documenting her inadequacies and questioning her suitability for military service. Her willingness to volunteer for the most dangerous and technically demanding aspect of the rescue operation suggested either complete misunderstanding of the tactical situation or capabilities that she had successfully concealed during her time at Forward Thunderbolt. Captain Mendez found herself facing a decision that could determine the survival of 8 American soldiers trapped in enemy territory, with time constraints that eliminated opportunities for extensive deliberation. The conventional tactical approaches required resources and coordination that might not be available within the timeline imposed by enemy assault preparations, while Maya's proposal offered potential advantages if she possessed capabilities that her recent performance hadn't demonstrated. The helicopter insertion onto Hill 247 occurred under cover of pre-dawn darkness, with Maya and 2 spotters establishing their overwatch position while enemy forces continued their preparations for the final assault on the trapped American patrol. The terrain at the insertion point was even more challenging than satellite imagery had suggested, with loose rock and steep inclines that required careful movement to avoid detection by Taliban observers positioned throughout the surrounding mountains. Maya's transformation began the moment she stepped off the helicopter and began organizing her equipment with movements that demonstrated familiarity with operational procedures that none of her fellow soldiers had witnessed during her time at Forward Thunderbolt. Her gear selection and positioning reflected experience with long-range precision, shooting that went far beyond the basic marksmanship she had displayed during training exercises. The rifle that Maya assembled from components in her equipment case bore little resemblance to the standard M4 carbine she had carried during previous training activities. The weapon was a custom-built precision system featuring a match-grade barrel, specialized trigger group, and optical sight that represented thousands of dollars in modifications designed specifically for extreme-range engagements. Every component showed signs of extensive use and meticulous maintenance that spoke of countless hours of field operations. Sergeant Miller, the senior spotter assigned to Maya's team, watched with growing amazement as she established her shooting position with procedures that reflected training he had never encountered during his own sniper school experience. Her preparation ritual included environmental assessments, range calculations, and equipment adjustments that demonstrated understanding of ballistic principles that exceeded anything taught in standard military marksmanship programs. Where did you learn to do that? Miller asked quietly as Maya made final adjustments to her rifle scope while consulting handwritten charts that contained ballistic data for specific ammunition lots and environmental conditions. Her methodical approach to preparation suggested experience with shooting scenarios where precision requirements left no margin for error. Maya's response was brief and focused, her attention concentrated on the technical challenges that would determine mission success. Different places, different instructors, different requirements, she said simply, continuing her preparation sequence without the nervous energy that characterized soldiers undertaking their first high-stakes operation. The view from Hill 247 provided clear observation of the entire tactical situation, with enemy positions visible through high-powered optics and the trapped American patrol's defensive perimeter, clearly marked by their fighting positions and vehicle placement. Taliban forces had established 3 heavy machine gun positions on the surrounding ridgelines, creating interlocking fields of fire that made helicopter extraction impossible without neutralizing the enemy weapon systems. Maya's first target was the eastern machine gun position, located on a rocky outcropping approximately 850 meters from her overwatch position. The enemy crew had constructed overhead cover and flanking protection that provided excellent defensive capabilities while maintaining clear fields of fire across the valley floor. The shooting solution required precision that would challenge Olympic-level marksmen under controlled conditions, much less in combat circumstances with lives hanging in the balance. The wind conditions at Hill 247 created additional complications that Maya addressed through observation techniques that Miller had never seen employed by military marksmen. She monitored vegetation movement at multiple distances between her position and the target, reading atmospheric conditions with the sensitivity of someone who had learned that environmental factors could determine success or failure of precision. Engagements at extreme ranges. Maya's breathing pattern settled into the controlled rhythm that preceded her shot, and Miller watched through his spotting scope as she achieved the perfect stillness that marked truly exceptional marksmen. Her rifle remained motionless despite the challenging shooting position and environmental conditions that would have caused lesser shooters to struggle with stability and sight alignment. The shot, when it came, was delivered with timing that seemed to emerge from complete understanding of atmospheric conditions, target behavior, and ballistic requirements. The sound of the cartridge's detonation rolled across the mountainous landscape like distant thunder, but Maya maintained her shooting position long enough to observe bullet impact before beginning the process of engaging her second target. Through his spotting scope, Miller witnessed what appeared to be an impossible shot. Maya's bullet had struck the enemy machine gunner with precision that eliminated the target instantly, and the weapon system fell silent as the crew abandoned their position in confusion and terror. The range, environmental conditions, and target presentation had created a shooting challenge that Miller would have considered impossible for anyone except the most elite military marksman. "Jesus Christ," Miller whispered, his voice barely audible above the mountain wind. That was over 850 meters in shifting wind conditions. "I've never seen shooting like that from anyone, anywhere. How did you make that calculation?" Maya was already transitioning to her second target, a machine gun position on the western ridgeline that required a completely different ballistic solution due to changes in range, elevation, and wind exposure. Her movements remained calm and methodical, showing none of the excitement or relief that might have been expected after successfully completing such a challenging shot. The second target presented even greater technical difficulties due to increased range that exceeded 900 meters and target positioning that provided only minimal exposure of vulnerable areas. Enemy fighters at this position had learned from the elimination of their eastern counterpart and were maintaining better cover while continuing to deliver suppressive fire against the trapped American patrol. Maya's preparation for the second shot included adjustments to her rifle scope and consultation of ballistic charts that addressed the specific challenges created by increased range and different atmospheric conditions. Her calculations appeared to be performed mentally, without the electronic assistance that modern marksmen typically employed for extreme range engagements. The transformation in Maya's demeanor was complete and undeniable. The uncertain, physically limited soldier who had struggled with basic training requirements had been replaced by someone who moved with the confidence and precision of a master craftsman, employing skills refined through extensive practice under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Miller found himself witnessing capabilities that exceeded anything he had imagined possible, from the woman who had been the subject of mockery and concern throughout her time at Forward Thunderbolt. Her shooting technique incorporated elements that weren't taught in any military program he was familiar with, and her understanding of ballistic principles seemed to extend far beyond standard instructional materials. The second shot was delivered with the same clinical precision that had characterized her first engagement, and Miller watched through his optics as another enemy machine gun position fell silent. Maya's bullet had found its target despite range and environmental challenges that would have defeated most military marksmen, and the psychological impact on remaining enemy forces was immediately apparent as fighters began abandoning their positions. The third machine gun position, located on the northern ridgeline at a range approaching 920 meters, represented the most challenging shot of the engagement due to elevation differences and atmospheric conditions that created complex ballistic problems. Maya's final target was also the most critical, as this position commanded the primary helicopter approach route that would be used for extracting the trapped patrol. Maya's preparation for the final shot included consultation with Miller about atmospheric conditions and enemy behavior patterns, but her technical expertise clearly exceeded his own despite his specialized training as a military sniper. Her questions focused on details that most shooters wouldn't consider relevant, and her understanding of environmental factors reflected experience that went far beyond conventional military instruction. The final shot was delivered with precision that seemed to defy physical laws governing bullet trajectory and external ballistics. Maya's bullet traveled nearly 1,000 meters through shifting atmospheric conditions to eliminate a target that was barely visible through high-powered optics, achieving accuracy that Miller would have considered impossible under any circumstances. Silence that followed Maya's third shot was broken only by radio communications from the trapped patrol, reporting that enemy fire had ceased and requesting immediate helicopter extraction. The mission that had seemed impossible using conventional tactical approaches had been accomplished by a single soldier, whose capabilities had remained completely hidden during weeks of evaluation and training. Miller stared at Maya with expression that combined amazement, confusion, and dawning recognition that he had just witnessed something that would redefine his understanding of human capability and military potential. The woman who had been dismissed as inadequate for basic military service had just delivered the most impressive demonstration of marksmanship he had ever witnessed, the secure satellite communication that reached Captain Mendez 20 minutes after the successful extraction of Bravo Company carried authorization codes that required immediate response from the highest levels of military command. The voice on the encrypted channel belonged to General Patricia Hawkins, commander of Special Operations Command Central, whose direct involvement in what should have been a routine personnel matter indicated complexities that extended far beyond normal military procedures. General Hawkins' first question concerned Maya's current status and location, followed by specific instructions that Captain Mendez document every aspect of Maya's performance during the rescue operation. The general's tone carried urgency that suggested significant implications beyond the successful completion of a single mission, and her questions revealed detailed knowledge of Maya's background that hadn't been apparent from standard personnel records. Captain Mendez, I need you to understand that Staff Sergeant Chen's service record contains classifications that weren't available through normal channels, General Hawkins explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with information that existed at the very edges of official acknowledgement. Her presence at your facility represents the conclusion of a deep cover assignment that has lasted 18 months. The revelation that Maya had been operating undercover created immediate questions about the circumstances that had brought her to Forward Thunderbolt and the objective she had been assigned to accomplish during her seemingly disastrous integration with conventional military forces. Captain Mendez found herself trying to reconcile Maya's documented poor performance with General Hawkins' suggestion that her assignment involved capabilities that extended far beyond normal military requirements. General Hawkins provided additional information that began to explain the disconnect between Maya's apparent limitations and her demonstrated abilities during the rescue operation. Staff Sergeant Chen is a graduate of programs that don't appear in standard military databases. Her training includes specialized schools that operate under joint authority between multiple intelligence agencies, and her operational experience encompasses missions that remain classified at levels requiring presidential authorization for disclosure. The security clearances required to access Maya's complete service record exceeded those held by anyone at Forward Thunderbolt, creating a situation where her true qualifications had been invisible to the soldiers and officers who had been evaluating her performance. Her assignment to the Forward Operating Base had been designed to provide cover for intelligence gathering activities that required someone with her unique combination of skills and operational background. Captain Mendez requested clarification about Maya's specific qualifications and the training programs that had produced capabilities that seemed to exceed anything available through conventional military instruction. General Hawkins' response provided details that began to explain Maya's transformation from apparently inadequate soldier to someone capable of achieving results that defied normal expectations. Her marksmanship training was conducted by instructors whose identities remain classified, using techniques developed for operations where conventional approaches proved inadequate, General Hawkins explained. The precision shooting capabilities she demonstrated today represent skills that fewer than 50 people worldwide possess, developed through programs that combine the most advanced aspects of military, law enforcement, and civilian competitive shooting disciplines. The programs that had shaped Maya's abilities operated at the intersection of multiple government agencies, incorporating training methodologies that weren't available through standard military channels. Her instructors had included former special operations personnel, Olympic shooting coaches, and technical specialists whose expertise in ballistics and environmental factors exceeded anything taught in conventional sniper schools. Maya's cover assignment at Forward Thunderbolt had served multiple purposes beyond her primary intelligence gathering mission. Her deliberate display of substandard capabilities had been designed to eliminate suspicion about her true background, while providing opportunities to observe and evaluate the tactical capabilities and security procedures employed by conventional military forces operating in the region. The poor performance that had drawn mockery and concern from her fellow soldiers had been carefully calculated to maintain her cover while positioning her to respond effectively when circumstances required. Her specialized capabilities. Her training included extensive instruction in deception techniques that allowed her to conceal her true abilities, even under close observation by experienced military personnel. General Hawkins revealed that Maya's service record included operations in locations that didn't appear on official maps, conducting missions that had prevented terrorist attacks, eliminated high-value targets, and gathered intelligence that had influenced policy decisions at the highest levels of government. Her confirmed kill count exceeded any figure that would be acknowledged publicly, achieved during operations where single shots had determined the success or failure of strategic initiatives. The weapons and equipment that Maya had employed during the rescue operation represented technology that wasn't available through normal military supply channels. Her custom rifle incorporated components developed specifically for extreme-range precision shooting, manufactured by contractors whose work remained classified and whose client lists were restricted to personnel with security clearances that exceeded top-secret requirements. Maya's ammunition was hand-loaded using components that combined the most advanced aspects of civilian competitive shooting with military specifications for reliability under adverse conditions. The ballistic performance characteristics of her cartridges exceeded anything available through standard military procurement, providing capabilities that had enabled successful engagements at ranges where conventional military ammunition would prove inadequate. The training facilities where Maya had developed her skills operated under joint authority between the Central Intelligence Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, and Special Operations Commands from multiple military branches. Her instructors represented the most accomplished marksmen from military, law enforcement, and competitive shooting communities, selected for their ability to teach techniques that pushed human performance beyond normally accepted limitations. Captain Mendez learned that Maya's psychological profile had been developed through extensive evaluation by specialists who understood the mental characteristics required for operations, where individual performance could determine strategic outcomes. Her ability to function effectively under extreme stress, while maintaining the emotional control necessary for precision shooting, had been validated through testing that simulated conditions far more challenging than conventional military training. Cover identity that Maya had maintained during her assignment at Forward Thunderbolt required her to suppress instincts and capabilities that had been developed through years of specialized training. Her apparent struggles with basic military tasks had been performances designed to maintain credibility while avoiding situations that might reveal her true background to potential intelligence assets operating within conventional military structures. General Hawkins explained that Maya's assignment had included monitoring communications intercepts, evaluating defensive procedures, and identifying potential security vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile intelligence services. Her position within the unit had provided access to information and procedures that would have been unavailable to personnel whose backgrounds attracted attention from security personnel. The intelligence gathered during Maya's cover assignment had contributed to operational planning that prevented enemy attacks against multiple American installations throughout the region. Her observations about tactical procedures, equipment capabilities, and personnel strengths had provided insights that influenced resource allocation decisions and strategic planning at levels that affected theater-wide operations. Maya's extraction from her cover assignment had been planned to coincide with circumstances that would provide justification for revealing her true capabilities without compromising ongoing intelligence operations. The rescue mission had created an ideal opportunity for demonstrating skills that would otherwise have remained hidden, while providing cover for her transition back to acknowledged special operations assignments. The soldiers at Forward Thunderbolt, who had witnessed Maya's performance during the rescue operation, would be required to sign non-disclosure agreements that prevented them from discussing details about her capabilities or background. Their observations would contribute to after-action reports that remained classified, and their knowledge about Maya's true identity would be restricted through security procedures that protected ongoing operations. General Hawkins concluded her briefing by informing Captain Mendez that Maya would be extracted from Forward Thunderbolt within 72 hours, returning to assignments that required her specialized capabilities and couldn't be discussed through normal communication channels. Her brief presence at the Forward Operating Base had accomplished objectives that extended far beyond the successful rescue of a single patrol, contributing to intelligence efforts that would influence American military operations throughout the region. Staff Sergeant Kim approached Maya's position in the dining facility the morning after the rescue operation with the expression of someone carrying the weight of profound professional embarrassment. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, and his voice carried none of the confident authority that had characterized his interactions with Maya during her first weeks at Forward Thunderbolt. The man who had led the chorus of criticism about her apparent inadequacies now faced the reality that he had completely misjudged someone whose capabilities exceeded his own by margins he was still struggling to comprehend. "Ma'am, I need to apologize for my behavior and comments over the past 10 days, Kim said, his words measured and formal in a way that reflected genuine remorse rather than military protocol. "My assessment of your capabilities was completely wrong, and my comments were inappropriate and disrespectful. I allowed assumptions about physical appearance to blind me to qualifications that I should have recognized through more careful observation." Maya's response demonstrated the kind of grace under pressure that had enabled her to maintain her cover assignment despite constant criticism and barely concealed mockery from soldiers who considered themselves her superiors. Her tone remained calm and professional, showing no trace of vindictiveness or satisfaction at Kim's obvious discomfort with the reversal of their roles. "Staff Sergeant Kim, your assessment was based on the information available to you at the time," Maya replied quietly, her voice carrying understanding rather than judgment. "The performance I displayed during training exercises would have led any experienced soldier to question my capabilities. Your concerns about unit effectiveness and mission readiness were entirely appropriate given what you observed." Kim's attempt to explain his behavior revealed the depth of his confusion about Maya's true identity and the circumstances that had brought her to Forward Thunderbolt. His questions about her background and training reflected genuine curiosity about capabilities that seemed to exist outside normal military development programs. But Maya's responses remained carefully neutral, providing no details that might compromise ongoing security requirements. The conversation between Kim and Maya drew the attention of other soldiers who had participated in the morning's mockery and criticism, creating an uncomfortable situation where multiple personnel found themselves confronting the inadequacy of their own judgment and the professional embarrassment that came from so completely misreading a fellow soldier's capabilities. Corporal Washington joined the gathering with her own admission of error, her voice carrying the additional weight of disappointment in herself for failing to support another female soldier who had been facing exactly the kind of skepticism and prejudice that Washington herself had encountered throughout her military career. Her apology reflected not just professional misjudgment, but personal failure to recognize the challenges that women faced in proving themselves within male-dominated military environments. "Maya, I owe you more than an apology," Washington said, settling into the chair across from her with movements that reflected exhaustion and emotional stress. "As one of the few women at this base, I should have understood the position you were in and provided support instead of joining the criticism. I allowed my own insecurities about female soldiers' acceptance to influence my judgment about your capabilities." Maya's response to Washington's apology revealed insights about gender dynamics in military environments that none of the male soldiers had considered during their evaluation of her performance. Her explanation of the additional pressures that female soldiers faced when their capabilities were questioned provided perspective that helped Washington understand that Maya's apparent struggles had been part of a carefully constructed performance, rather than genuine limitations. Corporal Washington, the challenges that women face in proving themselves in combat environments create situations where every interaction becomes a test of credibility, Maya explained, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had navigated these challenges successfully throughout her career. "Your reaction to my apparent limitations was completely understandable given the stakes involved for all of us." Sergeant Rodriguez approached the expanding gathering with documentation that he had prepared during the early morning hours, including detailed analysis of Maya's shooting performance during the rescue operation and comparisons with the most accomplished marksmen he had encountered during 15 years of military service. His technical evaluation provided objective confirmation of capabilities that exceeded anything he had witnessed from military or civilian shooters. "I've been trying to understand the ballistic calculations required for those shots," Rodriguez explained, spreading his handwritten analysis across the table surface. "The environmental conditions, range variations, and target presentations created shooting problems that I would have considered impossible for anyone except maybe Olympic champions with perfect equipment and unlimited time for preparation." Maya's willingness to discuss the technical aspects of precision shooting provided the soldiers at FOB Thunderbolt with insights that transformed their understanding of marksmanship principles and advanced their own capabilities as combat marksmen. Her explanations of wind reading techniques, ballistic calculations, and equipment optimization reflected expertise that exceeded anything available through standard military training programs at the informal training session that developed from Maya's technical discussions provided immediate improvements in the shooting capabilities of soldiers who had previously considered themselves expert marksmen. Her teaching methods incorporated advanced concepts from competitive shooting, military special operations, and law enforcement precision shooting programs, creating a comprehensive approach that addressed deficiencies the soldiers hadn't realized existed in their own techniques. First Sergeant Barnes joined the gathering with official recognition of Maya's contribution to the successful rescue operation, but his formal commendation carried undertones of confusion about the administrative and security implications of her revealed capabilities. His questions about proper documentation and reporting procedures reflected the challenges that conventional military structures faced when dealing with personnel whose backgrounds exceeded normal classification levels. Staff Sergeant Chen, I need to ensure that your performance during yesterday's operation receives appropriate recognition through official channels, Barnes explained, his voice carrying the professional uncertainty of someone navigating unfamiliar administrative territory. However, I'm receiving guidance that suggests there may be security considerations that affect how we document and report your actions. Maya's response to Barnes' concerns about documentation provided no specific details about her background or the restrictions that governed her assignment at Forward Thunderbolt, but her professional handling of his questions demonstrated experience with security procedures that extended far beyond normal military requirements. Her suggestions about appropriate documentation methods reflected understanding of classification systems that Barnes hadn't encountered during his extensive military career. The transformation in attitudes toward Maya extended beyond simple recognition of her exceptional marksmanship capabilities to include broader reassessment of assumptions about capability assessment and personnel evaluation. Soldiers who had considered themselves expert at reading people and predicting performance found themselves questioning judgment methods that had failed so completely in Maya's case. Captain Mendez conducted formal interviews with personnel who had interacted with Maya during her time at FOB Thunderbolt, documenting their observations and reactions for reports that would contribute to analysis of cover identity, effectiveness, and operational security procedures. The interviews revealed consistent patterns of misjudgment that provided valuable insights about human psychology and perception management. The soldiers who had witnessed Maya's performance during the rescue operation found themselves struggling to reconcile their memory of her apparent limitations with evidence of capabilities that exceeded their own expertise by substantial margins. The cognitive dissonance created by this revelation forced them to reconsider fundamental assumptions about the relationship between appearance and capability that had guided their professional judgments. Throughout their military careers, Maya's departure preparations began during her final day at FOB Thunderbolt, with equipment packing and administrative procedures that provided no indication of her true destination or future assignments. Her professional handling of transition requirements demonstrated the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized her cover performance, maintaining security protocols even as her true identity became known to selected personnel. Informal farewell gathering organized by soldiers who had initially opposed Maya's presence at FOB Thunderbolt reflected the complete transformation in their attitudes and the genuine respect that had replaced their earlier skepticism. Their expressions of appreciation for her service and acknowledgement of their own misjudgments created an emotional conclusion to an assignment that had challenged everyone's preconceptions about capability and appearance. Maya's final conversations with individual soldiers provided personalized insights about their own potential for improvement and development, offering encouragement and technical guidance that reflected her genuine interest in their professional growth despite the treatment she had received during her cover assignment. Her generosity in sharing knowledge and expertise demonstrated character qualities that had remained hidden beneath her carefully constructed performance as an inadequate soldier. 3 years after Maya's departure from FOB Thunderbolt, the base's Training protocols had been revolutionized by insights gained from her brief but transformative presence among conventional military forces. The marksmanship instruction program now incorporated advanced techniques that Maya had shared during her final days at the facility, creating capabilities that exceeded previous standards by margins that impressed visiting instructors from elite military schools throughout the armed forces. Staff Sergeant Kim, now serving as the base's senior marksmanship instructor, had developed training curricula that combined traditional military shooting doctrine with precision techniques adapted from Maya's expertise. His classes attracted students from multiple military branches who sought instruction in long-range precision shooting that addressed scenarios where conventional approaches proved inadequate. Kim's transformation from skeptic to advocate represented a fundamental shift in his understanding of human potential and the dangers of judging capability based on superficial observations. The shooting range at Forward Thunderbolt featured a memorial plaque dedicated to Maya's service, though the inscription contained no specific details about her background or the classified operations that had shaped her extraordinary capabilities. The simple acknowledgement of her contribution to military marksmanship served as a permanent reminder to Kuntu soldiers that excellence often appeared in unexpected forms, and that assumptions about capability could blind even experienced professionals. To exceptional talent, Corporal Washington had parlayed her experience with Maya into a leadership role within the Army's women's integration programs, where she advocated for evaluation methods that looked beyond physical appearance to assess true capability and potential. Her presentations at military conferences included case studies that demonstrated how preconceptions about gender and physical limitations could prevent recognition of valuable contributions from personnel whose backgrounds didn't fit conventional expectations. Washington's mentorship programs for female soldiers emphasized the importance of maintaining professional excellence while understanding that proving oneself in male-dominated environments required persistent demonstration of capabilities that male counterparts could take for granted. Her guidance helped numerous women navigate the challenges of military service while developing confidence in their own abilities. Regardless of external skepticism, the intelligence-gathering methods that Maya had employed during her cover assignment became part of training doctrine for personnel assigned to sensitive reconnaissance missions, where blending into conventional military units required sophisticated deception techniques. Her success in maintaining cover while accomplishing complex intelligence objectives provided a template for future operations that required similar levels of operational security and performance management. Sergeant Rodriguez had established an equipment modification program that incorporated precision shooting accessories and techniques that Maya had introduced during her technical discussions with interested personnel. His workshop produced custom rifle modifications that enhanced accuracy capabilities for designated marksmen throughout the region, creating competitive advantages that influenced mission success rates during subsequent combat operations. The psychological impact of Maya's revelation extended far beyond the personnel who had witnessed her performance firsthand. Stories about her extraordinary capabilities spread throughout military communities, becoming part of folklore that emphasized the importance of recognizing potential regardless of how it was packaged. Training instructors used her example to challenge students' assumptions about capability assessment and encourage more thoughtful evaluation of personnel potential. First, Sergeant Barnes integrated Maya's case into leadership development curricula that addressed the cognitive biases that could prevent recognition of exceptional talent. His instruction emphasized that effective military leadership required the ability to see beyond surface appearances and identify capabilities that might not be immediately apparent through conventional evaluation methods. The base's medical personnel documented the physiological aspects of Maya's performance during the rescue operation, contributing to research about human potential under extreme stress conditions. Their analysis provided insights about the relationship between mental conditioning and physical performance that influenced training methods at facilities throughout the military, education system, combat units throughout the theater of operations. Requested assignment of personnel who had served with Maya, recognizing that exposure to her capabilities and methods provided advantages that couldn't be gained through conventional training programs. The soldiers who had learned from her example carried forward insights about precision shooting and tactical thinking that enhanced their units' effectiveness during subsequent operations. The classified after-action reports from Maya's rescue operation became required reading for personnel assigned to special operations planning positions, providing case studies in the application of unconventional solutions to tactical problems that defied traditional military approaches. Her methods influenced operational planning throughout the special operations community. Maya's legacy at Forward Thunderbolt transformed the culture from one that valued appearance and conventional indicators of capability to one that emphasized proven performance and results-based evaluation. The change created an environment where innovation and unconventional thinking were encouraged rather than dismissed, leading to tactical developments that enhanced mission success rates. The soldiers who had initially mocked Maya's small frame and apparent limitations became advocates for thorough capability assessment and champions of the principle that true strength often appeared in unexpected forms. Their professional growth from the experience created leadership qualities that influenced their entire careers and the development of personnel under their command. What started as a story of assumption and misjudgment became a testament to the a testament to the transformative power of recognizing excellence regardless of how it was presented. Maya's brief presence at Forward Thunderbolt had challenged everyone's preconceptions about capability and created lasting changes that influenced military culture for years to come. Her example reminded an entire generation of soldiers that the most dangerous opponents were often those who appeared least threatening, and that true capability couldn't be measured by physical appearance or conventional indicators of strength. The lesson became part of military wisdom that was passed down through training programs and professional development courses. What did you think of Maya's incredible transformation from dismissed outsider to legendary hero? Have you ever witnessed someone completely defy expectations in your own life? Share your stories in the comments below about times when first impressions proved completely wrong. If this tale of hidden excellence and ultimate vindication inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our incredible stories of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. What other stories of underestimated heroes would you like us to explore next? Let us know in the comments, and remember, sometimes the greatest strength comes in the smallest packages.